This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film Festivals. My name is John Bleasdale and I'm delighted to be joined by
Rafa Sales Ross.
Rafa is a writer for lots of different places, including Variety, Letterboxd, all over the shop really, freelancer much like myself, and we've met at several festivals, so I'm delighted to get her take on Karlovy Vary. This is a festival that takes place in the Czech Republic, at the historical spa town that inspired Wes Anderson film Grand Budapest Hotel. And this is your first time at the festival, only my second. What do you make of the festival, Rafa?
First of all, this is the nicest you've ever been to me. Thank you. That's lovely. But yeah,
broadcast friendly.
Yes. I always wanted to come to Karlovy Vary. I always thought that was a beautiful city and the program was a really exciting discovery opportunity during the summer festivals, and I was really glad that the opportunity presented itself. And I think it's a beautiful city. I think it's incredibly friendly to audiences. I don't think I've seen that many young people, cinephiles, trying to take chances on films in many years really, and really reminded me of the beginning of my own festival obsession and cinephilia. So it's been a lovely time.
Yeah, I totally agree. There is something about the audience participation in this festival which is really special. One example of that, well, probably an extreme example, but I went to see Love Lies Bleeding, which of course was premiered several months ago in the UK, but this was the Czech premiere, and they had a bodybuilder come on the stage and do a workout and get the audience involved, and this was like a theatre of over 1,000 people jumping up and down and doing a routine, and the whole place shaking, and it was just so electric for the beginning of the film. And wow, what a film.
Yeah, I think these are the things that a lot of the times when we're doing festivals as journalists and just going to those fairly sanitized press screenings, you really miss that contact with the audience and the excitement of seeing something that you've been waiting to see. And Love Lies Bleeding is a perfect example. I saw it at the Berlinale and it was just an injection of adrenaline. It's such a fun film, and this is the perfect way to introduce it.
Yeah, Kristen Stewart is a gym manager who falls in love with a bodybuilder. What's the name of the actress of the bodybuilder?
Katie O'Brien. And
this is a second film by Rose Glass. And personally, for my money, I thought this was superior to her Saint Maud, which I liked.
This is interesting. I think they are such different films, and I just remembered the experience of seeing Saint Maud so vividly at the LFF premiere a few years ago. And I think Rose Glass is just a really exciting new talent, someone who's just playful with the form and who has a really interesting eye for imagery. And I think those are two very different films, but very well-realized takes on femininity in a sense, and the female body. And it's such a hoot of a film. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it sort of blends a lot of different genres. There's film noir in there, a little bit of Blood Simple, that sort of desert noir that you have from John Dahl. And then you have like a surrealist sort of science fiction element to it at certain stages. And it really I read some reviews which were saying, it goes a bit off the rails, but that's exactly where you want this type of film to go.
I think certain films have the danger of taking themselves too seriously in a way that they are overthinking the sort of structure, narrative, and when they're going to dip into genre and when to do that in terms of beats. And with Love Lies Bleeding, it is unpredictable and fun and quite free in the sense that it plays with what you're just saying, these notions of pulp and genre and noir. And I think Kristen Stewart is such an interesting performer. I think it's the kind of role that really showcases her awkwardness, almost the way that she occupies a frame and she kind of reduces herself to a certain space, and here is really interesting. And then you have obviously Katie O'Brien, who is gorgeous, just this beautiful, powerful woman on screen, and I had a lot of fun with it. And Ed Harris, an incredible wig. That's his wig. He brought that wig to the set. He wanted to wear that. When I learned that, I was already in before the film even started. He's great.
There is some amazing hair don'ts in this film. Ed Harris's own, and Dave Franco has sort of a rat tail mullet, which is enough for you to think, oh, that's a red shirt in Star Trek. That fatality is going to happen sometime soon. That's not a spoiler. That's absolutely it. Let's talk about some films that have shown here as world premieres. I think a film that we both watched and we both enjoyed was a Norwegian film, Lovable, by Laila Ingolfsdottir.
I think it's Lilja Ingolfsdottir, but we are probably going to be butchering some European names. Apologies in advance.
I think you were closer. I think you win that. What did you make of this film?
It's really interesting because after The Worst Person in the World done so well in Cannes a few years ago, there has been this sort of new wave of Norwegian cinema that is tapping onto the success of that film. And this is by the same producers, and it's also about the idea of a female coming of age that comes later in life and is triggered by the demise of a relationship to a creative person. So there's a lot of the same beats there, but at the same time it's doing something completely different in terms of investigating the apex, the moment of a divorce. And I thought it was anxiety inducing in a very accomplished way. I was so uncomfortable the entire time. The conversations that we've been having on the ground with other critics have been all, this film has made me think what would be like in my relationship if things were happening. And for a feature debut, I think to put the audience in that space, in that headspace, is a real accomplishment, really.
Yeah, I think this film was amazingly assured for a debut. Apparently, she'd been working on it for about 6 years. And in a sense, you can sort of tell at the level of maturity, because it doesn't feel like a debut. It feels like a film of a filmmaker who's emerged fully formed. I agree, it does have some sort of superficial similarities to The Worst Person in the World, but this is a much sort of darker piece of work. I think the humour is there, but it's not it's not the point of the film. Kind of almost strikes me as a little bit Bergman-esque, just in the way it's approaching its topic. It's sort of analysis of relationships in a way that makes you shift your perspective and your judgment of the characters. It reminds me of Scenes of a Marriage in that sense. But I was really into it, and I think that Norwegian cinema, as you say, it's having something of a resurgence, and it's good to see. I'm here for it.
Yeah, obviously I think Bergman is the entry point whenever we hear of divorce cinema, but I always had a sort of distance in these films in terms of the aftermath. To me wasn't as interesting as the eruption point, I think, and I was always quite curious. And I think the biggest accomplishment to me about Lovable is that it plays with this understanding of perspective and of rereading or even reimagining narratives in your head in ways that serve your own agenda and the things that you want to feel, instead of investigating the things that make you uncomfortable. And I think she did this in an imagetic way that is really clever and that instigates this reflection that is really hard to do through script only. And I think it's interesting, and she spends a good hour just prodding at the moment of implosion in a way that to me is a really clever choice, instead of just trying to understand the aftermath and how to get out of the situation and the things that come after. Because everyone who has gone through a breakup is very aware of the desperation that hits you in that moment, in those minutes that feel like 6 months and you just don't see a way out. And that's a very relatable human emotion that I think in filmmaking is clever for you to tap into.
Yeah, absolutely. That sort of ignition point that sets the fuse for the destruction of the relationship in the end. Another film that we both saw that I think we were both very impressed by was Windless, which is I'll sort of give a synopsis of sorts, although the story itself is fairly slight. It's a man who's very tattooed, who goes back home because they are moving, they're redeveloping the area where his family's apartment is, and he's basically, the apartment is empty after the death of his father. His mother's moved away, and he is preparing it for sort of, it's being bought and I presume demolished, and he's also moving the bodies in the graveyard, which is also making way for a development. It's shot in a very tight ratio. It's not Academy, it's even tighter than that. I think it's one by one. Or three by three.
Well, 1 by 1, there you go.
And it's and it's basically him learning about his father and coming to terms with his own feelings about his father. And it's a fascinatingly unemotional drama in some ways, but it just looks so interesting. I just found this film really fascinating to look at.
This is, I think, one of my favorite things about Karlovy Vary so far, because I had absolutely no idea what this film was about. I entered the press screening and it was like being smacked in the face in terms of composition. I think this is truly one of the most interesting, most beautiful, most compelling films I've seen all year of all the festivals. I think it is a film that at certain points I wanted to go into the projection booth and get them to stop at a certain frame so I could stay in it a little longer to understand the way that the framing was happening here. There's a lot of Catholic imagery, the way that lights create halos and this juxtaposition of flame and earth, and even a dinner scene that looks like the Last Supper. And I think it's just a film by a director who really understands the power of imagery and the power of composition and cinematography, or even production design, even walls that, as the film goes by, are emptier, and then it creates room for other things to develop. You know, this juxtaposition between presence and absence. And oh my god, the supporting cast, these older Bulgarian men that are in the film for perhaps 3-4 minutes and just knock you out and just make you think of these lonely people inhabiting these spaces, and who have lived a life of conflict and of being void of food, of the basic sustenance of life, but also of presence and of companionship, of warmth, human warmth, and the lives that they have led. And it's just truly a striking film, and I hope there's a life for it after Karlovy Vary in terms of circulation and distribution, because it's a beautiful film to be watching in the cinema.
Yeah, I think that's so true of what you just said about how these are characters who have been deprived of a lot of things. There's a beautiful line in it where someone's describing advice that his father gave another man, which was, you only ever kiss your children when they're asleep, because you don't want them to feel they're being kissed. So that way they grow up strong, and therein lies a heck of a lot of the troubles of these people. It's just so, I think also one of the things that's interesting about Karlovy Vary is you get these films from the East, and you do get these films from Eastern Europe, Central Europe, that may not get as underlined as they do in other festivals, maybe marginalised a little bit rather than being in the main competition. So it's great to see these films in that presence. Speaking of which, another film that we both watched that I think we had maybe slightly different views of, but I very much liked, was called Tiny Lights, which I'm not sure where that came from. It's not Croatian. I think it's Czech, so it's right from here. And here is this in a sense is a bit of a genre in itself. You mentioned Petite Maman before we started recording, Celine Sharma's film. Ponette is another example of this, where you basically see from the child's point of view, even sort of physically, the level of the camera is very much on the child. This film takes a leaf out of Son of Saul's book by pointing the camera very much at the subject, so you're not sort of seeing through her eyes so much as just watching her face all the way through the film as she reacts to things. It's a day in the life of a 6 or 7 year old child, and it's a summer day. She's not in school. She's sort of got a lot of free time, looked after by her grandparents for a while, and it looks like the marriage between her mum and dad is in a state of terminal dissolution. You're in the middle of this process. This isn't something that is sort of like is happening properly on this day. We're in the middle of it rather than at the beginning or the end of it, and I just found this very beguiling. I thought the performance of the child was wonderful. It looked beautiful. The only thing I would slightly have a criticism of is the filmmaker sort of insisted on putting these little sort of snippets of almost Super 8 frames of her as an adult in between some of these episodes, and that just felt unnecessary. Yeah, we get it. You are this person.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong in the production notes after this, but I think this is the third feature in 5 years by this young Czech filmmaker, and the room was full of Czech journalists, and they were quite excited to see a new work by her. So she seems to be a prolific new voice in Czech cinema, which is interesting, and definitely there is an understanding of the cultural climate of that point in her life, maybe 15, 20 years ago in Czech Republic, and the conversations around gender roles and gender stereotypes and wives as getters, as mothers, and the entire time there's this theme of you should be in a loveless marriage as long as it benefits your young child, and kind of the emotional scarring that comes from that. And I agree with you. I think it's really well shot. I think it's a really interesting exercise in reevaluating and revisiting memories, formative memories. But as we're speaking earlier, I do every once in a while have issues with films that are told from the point of view of a young child. So every once in a while it loses me a little bit. But there's a comedic performance by the grandmother that is such a delight. She has such incredible comic timing, and I think this was a really asserted feature of casting. And she's a theater actress in Czech Republic, and quite a famous one. So I think Czech audiences will be particularly excited to watch that one.
And the name of the director is Beata Parkanova. That's the person to look out for when it comes to future films, and maybe to go back and check out some of her earlier films as well. Are there any other films that you want to mention that you've seen?
There's this documentary called The Other One, and it's also a Czech documentary, and it's by Maria Magdalena Kočová, and it is about glass children, which are the children that have a sibling with special needs. And in this case, it is the 17-year-old girl who has an 11-year-old sister with severe autism, and who has these really big abusive meltdowns, and she is speaking to the camera in a very informal first-person kind of observational documentary, speaking about the fact that she was an only child for the first 7 years of her life, and then suddenly the entire attention and focus of her family shifted entirely, and she's undergoing this very formative point of her life when she is applying for college or for university, and having to confront the idea of no longer being able to help her parents with her sister, and the guilt that comes from that, but also the joyful and very powerful idea of freedom and of existing away from the confinement of her house and the meltdowns of her sister. And I'm really curious to learn a little bit more about how this came to be, really, because the parents allowing this filmmaker to be in their house and to expose them in this sense that it's not necessarily a very flattering light for the parents, although you do have this understanding that there's not much that they can do. But it's a conversation that I find particularly interesting, and I think here is done without gawking and without this very complicated idea of voyeurism that can put children with disabilities in a spotlight that is not necessarily morally effective. So I think it's a really interesting documentary, and I think it has gone a bit understated in terms of screening series and special screenings, so not in competition, but an interesting documentary nonetheless.
Yeah, I'd like to add another documentary to that. It's interesting what you say about not being exploitative as well, because I think this is a documentary which the filmmaker himself has sort of wondered whether it's a documentary. He's stated his own doubt about this, what to call it, exactly how to categorize it. And this is a film called Reality. Is it called Reality or is it called Real? Yeah, I'm gonna double check that, because by Ole Sentsov, yes, and Ole Sentsov is a filmmaker, but he is also a serving soldier in on the front in Ukraine, and this is essentially a 93-minute slice of life, because it's just footage from his GoPro camera on his helmet in the middle of a battle in which he is in the trenches, literally in the trenches, as gunfire and artillery fire explode all around him, and he is radioing to different units and going up the chain of command in order to try to rescue other units which are trapped and under fire in different parts of the battlefield. And you can see problems with ammunition, problems with evacuation, you can see human frailty, you can see people who are reluctant to go anywhere. No one wants to put their head over the trench and look out, which is understandable given the circumstances. And in a way, and this is why, although they're very different subjects, the documentary you just talked about is connected to this in a sense, is that often with war documentaries there is a sense of war porn, there is a sense of exploitation of misery. This is so austere, this is so unedited. The film begins and stops. It doesn't have a beginning and an ending. There's a little bit of explanation when the film cuts out, but it cuts out, So there is a sense that you are just getting an absolutely crude look at how these soldiers are behaving, and they're terrified, and they're not playing up for the camera. There's a very real sense that I don't think they know there's a camera switched on, because they have these GoPros, but they're not necessarily being used all the time.
I did hear, and I'm curious to know if this is actually truth, that the director didn't know that the camera was on actually, and then he came across this footage, and that the credit is not directed by, it's filmed by or captured by. So I haven't seen it, and I'm really curious now. I think I am in a bit of a mind space when watching real war footage is quite mentally perilous for me, but I think it's an interesting exercise, and once again, I think creatively it's an opportunity that doesn't really suffice every so often. So yeah, it has been one of the talking points at the festival for sure.
I think I think the difficulty he's had actually describing this, one way I was thinking of it really was as an artifact, and as such, it's something that's a found object, and we should. It's not so much you watch it and you don't critically appraise it as you would a film, although we're talking about it on this podcast, but it's more that you witness it, and witnessing it it's not necessary that everyone does that or feels obliged to, but witnessing it is informative and to some degree fascinating, and disturbing and all those other things. And finally, a film that I wanted to sort of close with, because I've got an interview with the director which I recorded and which will go straight after this, is a film called Xoftex, which is a film that has been made. It's a fictional film, but it's been based on the research done in a Greek refugee camp in which the asylum seekers are waiting for the telephone call. I think I loved this. I loved this. I certainly appreciated it, and I loved it much more than quite a few people. I think Guy Lodgers has really rated it. I think everybody else sort of admired it rather than loved it. What was your take on it?
Once again, I think being in Karlovy Vary has been really restoratively, in the sense that I have been exposed to filmmakers playing with cinema as a narrative tool in ways that are really refreshing and interesting. So I think formally I admired it, and I think a lot of what they're doing within a narrative, and almost this liminal space of what is true and what isn't. And I think obviously the migration issue, the migration crisis in Europe is a massive conversation at the moment. And once again, as we were just speaking about the model boundaries of cinema, once again here it is always something that you approach with a little bit of reticence, and what is this going to do, what is the conversations this is going to bring. And I think what the film is, it's actually really different and interesting and fresh. I am not completely sold on how it unravels, and I think the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes are perhaps what I liked most, and I think is the most accomplished. But it is definitely one of those talking points in a festival that even if it's something that you don't love, you definitely admire and you respect what it is trying to do, which I think is the most important thing.
Okay, that's brilliant. So we're going to now listen to the direct Noaz Deshe. Okay, so he's going to talk straight after this. But before that, I'd like to thank Rafa. Where can we find more of your work?
You can find more of my work on my social media everywhere. It's Rafi, so RAFIEWS. My portfolio is the same.com. And yes, you can just find me across social media, writing for several publications. And thanks for having me, John.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. So the first thing I have to ask you is the pronunciation of the title of the film.
Xoftex.
Xoftex.
Yeah.
And this is an actual place?
Yeah, well, I changed the name because it's an actual place.
Right.
And because also I wanted to be removed from and more into a parallel reality, because the actual place itself is a little bit purgatorial, not a little bit, a lot. In the conditions that it creates when you're there, because of the sets of circumstances that place specifically is. So Xoftex is a burnt out toilet paper factory that's in a wasteland north of Thessaloniki. It's a camp that, there was Idomeni, which was a little bit like Calais on the border of Macedonia. And the military, one day, there was so many people there, around 25,000 people, and the military and the police came and broke it up and just had planes flying, F-16s flying above it, terrifying people.
So this is people like trying, at the border...
People are trying to cross to the Balkans, to Europe.
Right.
And they came from Turkey or from the islands, and they broke it apart and put people on big white buses and drove them to many different camps in that region. And one of them was Xoftex. And Xoftex specifically was behind an industrial train yard, and that trains would stop before they go to the Balkans. So there was very rife activity there of people trying to get on the trains, and gangs that are not recognized by the asylum system, or people who are trying to benefit from it. So it was dangerous.
When you say not recognized, is there a sense of maybe complicity, that they're not recognized by the asylum system, but if they can get rid of a few people, they're quite happy for that to happen?
I don't know. Well, if you visited Greece in 2015, 16, 17, 18, I think it was so chaotic in terms of just trying to deal with a massive amount of people. You can have a lot of criticism towards the government there, but also how do you actually deal with this influx? And you have maybe 100, I don't want to give exact numbers, but you have many children disappearing, unaccompanied minors. There's an organization called Bodasaki. It's also something I researched that tracked an obscene amount of children disappearing, and the complete impossibility to track what's happening with the funding when it comes to each camp. And specifically Xoftex had a corruption scandal that involved the Minister of Migration and missing funds, and at some point they probably somebody siphoned off something.
Quite a lot of money.
Yeah, and if you Google it, you'll see it's a camp that had very violent events that were quite well documented. And at the time I was volunteering I came to help and study basically how the camps function from a friend that started a camp. I was shepherding a camp called Elpida, which was a safe camp, an example camp, something that the Greek government really didn't want, because it gave a signal, come over. And
so they wanted a hostile environment.
I don't think they knew what they wanted, and I think there was a lot of conflicting. I think there were a lot of conflicting wants,
right?
And it's also just before Hillary and Trump's election, so that also changed, because people that came over there from the U.S. with the feeling that they're going to be supported by certain policies suddenly were left without the support once the election turned around, and so that was a huge impact also.
So you find this place, and you're going to base a film on this place, but it feels like that the film that you make is very different from the way these refugee narratives are usually told.
Yes and no. So that's true if you document the raw gravity reality of what you see, but if I'm walking up to this meeting right now and I'm imagining how it's going to be, there's 1,000 things passing through my head. And if I was making a documentary about that moment, then I have the total liberty of documenting the unseen. The first night I went to Xoftex, I just stood outside. There was a hole in the fence. There was some people smoking outside the fence. I started speaking to them, and they were so eager to tell me about that they're not getting a call back from the asylum system, the problems in the camp, where they came from, when they hope, what country they want to go to. They were so eager to communicate because they're so isolated. And I said, okay, let's walk in and let's make a group. And we huddled together into the Red Cross tent inside the camp. And within 5 minutes, we were telling each other ghost stories, and half an hour later, we were filming some sort of strange action ghost hunting film in the camp. And then we went back and we watched the footage, and everybody was laughing. And they asked me, when can we do this again? And I said, okay, let's figure it out. Who should I speak to? Who do you trust in the camp? And I said, there's a small NGO here called Intervolve, and there's an amazing woman working with it called Lamia Karkur, and they might be able to help you to get here officially. And at the time also there was an Italian group from Theater of the Oppressed coming to do 7 days of exercises with people. And I joined them together with a friend from Athens that came down to help me out. And we were so inspired by this whole effort. And Intervolve helped me get a badge. And suddenly I was coming to the camp a few times a week and spending time with people in their caravans and making a workshop. And we were filming. We did one exercise where we started from very simple exercises, like very simple drama games, like a little bit of it in the movie, like trust.
Yeah, you see the trust exercise, yeah.
The very simple ones. But then one night we said, okay, everybody makes a movie trailer and performs it as a play.
Right.
And so it was like 10-minute plays that people did. And suddenly from that, one group wanted to make a gangster film. The other group wanted to make a zombie movie. And everybody was making their movies. And then
And these people don't necessarily have any experience, or were there actors?
Not experience at all.
Right.
They were just like, this is something to do while you're going crazy, because all you do is sleep with your phone, waiting for a phone call from the asylum system, and you're in some sort of purgatorial no man's land that's dangerous, horrible. You're not being taken care of, and you're completely dehumanized. You're treated like garbage, and then suddenly, for I don't know, and not just us, but anything just reminds you that this is not life.
Yeah, you're a human being. That's one of the things that I was most impressed by in the film, was at the very beginning when they're joking and laughing, and you so rarely see humour and laughter. Even though these are miserable conditions, they're human conditions, and laughter is part of that, right?
Yeah, but we all know that funerals sometimes are the funniest places too.
Right. Yeah.
And in the most horrible place, in the most difficult places, if you go to Ukraine, people deal with this with humor. There's no other way. And especially in a camp where you're all together. Then I met this group, Ali Abbas and Muhammad Abbas, his brother.
Ali Abbas, who made Borders and...
No. Ali Abbas is a young Palestinian kid, Syrian kid, and his brother. And it's funny because Muhammad Abbas is the name of Abu Mazen, the head of the Palestinian Authority. And
so no, we don't want any confusion. Well,
no confusion. And they were dreaming of going to Sweden, and they were convinced they're going to Sweden. They couldn't know. Which is the nice bit is that they did go to Sweden at the end, and I've been filming them throughout this process. I've documented this whole time. So there's a documentary, which is a sister film of this film, that's going to be ready at some point in the next 10 months. And it follows their process throughout the camp, all the way to Sweden, protests now. And so they started by they wanted to make satirical news, and they would show it in the camp. And we helped them out with editing it. And then once the workshop developed, and we tried a Hamlet scene, and they was like, we're making a zombie movie.
Okay.
And we started to kind of support it, but then the asylum system kicked in. There were riots in the camp, and eventually the camp was broken apart because and people were sent other places. I followed them, and I also followed the young Algerian guy that actually was sleeping in a broken train, and I followed him to Marseille. So everything you see in the film is very closely related to events. And when you talk about how to document that, I don't know how to document it without the dream part of it.
Right. And because there's science fiction in there, there's horror, there's comedy.
I think if you show just the raw gravity reality of it, then you are at the risk of victimizing people and dehumanizing people, because you're not showing their aspirations, you're not showing how they're fantasizing, you're not showing that they're funny, you're not showing how talented or their potential, or I'm not sure you can. I think it's a more effective way to put you in a state of mind. And at least in this case, the experiment to bring you in a more intimate space is to drop a little bit that documentary reality and bring you into the documentary of the dream.
Yeah, there's some remarkable shots as well, and there's shots that go through the refugee camp. How did you actually recreate the camp? Was that all done on us?
We were very lucky that in Berlin we met a person who he used to be the head of the anti-terror unit of Germany, became the head of the housing of some administration of, I don't want to be incorrect, but he was in charge of all the refugee camps, housing, or I don't know exactly the detail. He was lovely. And we went to Tempelhof in Berlin, which was a massive camp.
Yeah.
And he said that there's a place that they were storing all the houses that are very similar to the ones they have in Greece, that they probably ship them to Greece sometimes. And we could actually reorganize that place and use it as a set. And we went there, and it was strikingly similar to Xoftex, and with some movie magic we could make it work. There was a train passing behind. There was a abandoned warehouse right next to it, with tents inside, that we could put in tents inside and build a camp. So we could strike at the same sort of points where we create a similar environment.
What could you? I mean, we're talking right at a point where you have like Marine Le Pen has just won an enormous victory for the far right.
You mean Russia's wet dream?
Yeah, exactly. And you have these right-wing parties fed by anti-immigration, anti-asylum seeker, but they conflate the two anyway.
I think we're really we are at a very dangerous point of not reading actual news, just being led by an algorithm that its main purpose is to create hate, and because it gets fed by your instant gratification mechanisms. And those instant gratification mechanisms are very easy to feed if you know what each person reacts to. So if a person wants ego gratification, that's what you're going to eat on your media diet. And if you want love in all its forms, that's what you're going to eat. And a lot of people want to hate.
Yeah.
Because they're angry. So they get fed more, and they get fed in a way that completely erodes the idea of complexity from narratives. And when you only consume headlines that fit your narrative, that justify something you can quote very quickly, you're the one that's being roboticized. And that's the most dangerous thing we're dealing with, that news comes from TikTok, that the only people delivering the news are comedians, that the other people delivering the news are full-blown actors with a narrative script, and the few journalists that we have are either prosecuted, demonized, or executed.
Yeah. And so in that context, a film like this is attempting to recreate that empathy and complexity and nuance.
I think empathy, I think it's a word that's used, but it should not be a bonus. It should be built in, and in the sense of, it's not something we should even need to mention.
It's not like a virtue, it just should be a characteristic.
Yeah, it's not something that you should mention. It should be it's the basic it's a basic compound of you being a human being, and we're losing it. And we're losing it now. You look at genocide in Gaza, and you look at how easily polarized, with very little openness for the complexity, or even narratives that push for solutions. Most of the narratives you have there push for extreme polarity, and there's rarely any media that's offering or focusing on solutions that are there, and or not highlighting it, because the benefit is to keep on selling carnage, and that creates more carnage. It feeds more carnage.
When it comes to the future of how we're going to deal with the movement and displacement of people, which is not going to diminish in any real sense in the near future, do you see hope?
You have to see hope, else what's at my work, I see my work as something very simple. You get a flashlight, you go somewhere where you feel you need to point it at. Sometimes it's a camera, sometimes it's a piece of music. Whatever you can do, you should do with that flashlight. And in the best case, it's filmmaking. In the best case, it gets to be displayed in an amazing festival like here, and you get to work with collaborators like Babak, who's my co-writer, or the Khafiri brothers that I met in Berlin, and through them we found all these actors that are incredible, and all of them were asylum seekers at the time. And Abod, who's the lead actor, was living in a refugee camp in Berlin when we were filming. So we tried to keep it very close to the documentary. I don't know, you have to... every small action that somebody does really counts. And I know it doesn't feel like it, but this is the balance we have. And you're not going to get any gift for it. I mean, we are definitely getting a gift here just by being here. But
Yes.
But I'm saying it's not like you're going to feel the repercussions of doing something that you feel is right. But it is influencing, and you have to speak about the things that really bother you. You have to speak about Gaza, and you have to speak about what's happening in Palestine and in Israel and in Lebanon and in Syria right now that people are not talking about, and in Ukraine that suddenly is not so much in the news, and and Sudan and Congo. This social movement that's happening, and it's beautiful to see what's happening, needs to be global.
Yeah. We've got to defeat whataboutery by going, yes, exactly. What about all of this?
Yeah.
You know. One of the people that I noticed in the credits as well was the American producer Bo Williamson. Yeah.
Yeah. Bo, incredible writer, producer. Bo and I went into Ukraine pretty much on the second week of the war. And we teamed up also with Peter Versilov, he's the head of Vonya Group, and Media Zona, the Russian-speaking free press in Canada. And we spent the last 2 years in and out of Ukraine shooting a documentary together. Very intimate study of love, and we're editing it, and it's in the process.
Excellent. So he got involved with this because he was adjacent.
Also, I mean, we through his producing partner, we met before, and it's just he's a brilliant man, and they wanted to support the project. He came by when we were shooting. He's a big inspiration.
Excellent. Well, listen, Noah, thanks so much for talking to me.
Thank you very much. This is lovely.
Here I am with...
I have to say my name, okay. My name is Christos Nikou, and I'm trying to be a director.
And
I'm coming from Greece, and we try to make 2 films, Apples and Fingernails. And
so Fingernails was distributed by Apple, and Apples was the name of your first film.
Yeah, that's a coincidence.
Are you sure? It sounds like there was some thinking going on.
No, maybe it's an unlucky coincidence too.
So I'm going to be very honest with you. I've seen Apples, and I haven't seen Fingernails, despite the fact it's been out for a year. But I've heard from Rafa that it is an excellent film.
The thing is that nobody has seen Fingernails because nobody has Apple TV. Yeah, and we didn't release it in many theaters. And thank you so much for saying that from your friend that said... Who said that?
Rafa.
I don't know. Oh, it's Rafa? It's not Rafa?
Yeah, you've been pronouncing it incorrectly all this time.
Oh yes, because it's not Ronaldinho, it's Juanadinho. Yes, that's true. Okay, so Rafa. Thank you, Rafa.
Rafa is here listening in on our conversation, and Christos is just learning how to pronounce Portuguese.
Yeah. I was learning last week, actually. Because they told me that all this time, because I watch football, Ronaldinho is... I was saying Ronaldinho.
Yeah, me too.
No, it's Juanadinho.
Oh my God. Mind blown. Rafa is nodding because she understands how podcasts work. So you're here in Karlovy Vary, and Fingernails is the closing film. And you were talking to me yesterday that came to you as a bit of a surprise.
Yes, because first of all, the film was in festivals. We started in Telluride and then Toronto and other festivals in Europe and in US. And the whole team decided to stop being in festivals because the movie was in the platform. Even if, to be honest, there were many festivals that they wanted to invite the film, but after the release on the platform. But that's the way that Apple works. But Karel was able with me Karel Lok, the festival director, to convince them. And actually he did something crazy because the movie was playing in London and he asked me if he can come to the screening, if I can give him a ticket for the screening in London. And I said, yeah, of course. And he said, I said, please come and then you can come to our party. And so he flew from Prague. He arrived 3 o'clock in the evening. He watched the movie. Then he came to our party, and 6 o'clock in the morning he left back from Prague. So he did that trip only in order to watch the movie in London. And yeah.
What a party monster that he was as well. And
I think that it wasn't for the party, but yes. It's
okay, can you describe to us the film Fingernails and the sort of? I mean, Apples I loved had such a sort of great sense of humour. I mean, the word quirky is used way too much and is way too slappable, but I just think it's a good sense of humour. So I would characterise it as.
I think that Fingernails has almost the same sense of humor because, I mean, we made it. But it's, if I can describe it, I think that it's a movie about love. And in the movie we are trying to, to approach the term love and the topic of love that exists in our lives forever. In a way that I feel that right now, I don't know if love is something so uncertain, and love in the time of the digital technology, and especially with the internet right now, has changed completely the way that we are approaching, love. Because, for example, I was reading recently that we are touching the screen of a phone 2,617 times per day, an average person. And sometimes we are touching it for love, and we are looking through dating apps and other ways to find love. And we are touching them with our fingers and our fingernails. So there is a connection there, I feel, between fingernails and the way that we look for love right now.
Swipe left, swipe right, etc.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And we are trying to, I think that always love should go through eyes. And I think that we should look people more in the eyes and find something real, which is what we try to do in the film.
Having made this film and it going into streaming and everything, I mean, everybody's talking about the future of cinema and the future of streaming and all this sort of stuff. Is that something that you feel strongly about in terms of you looking at I mean, we've just heard in the news in the UK that a whole bunch of cinemas look like they're going to be closing because a chain is pulling out of cinema distribution. How do you look at the future?
I really, really hope that streaming platforms should play only TV series and movies that are released at least after 1 year in a cinema. And movies will be only in theaters because it's the only place in the world that you can watch a movie without looking at your phone. Everywhere else you are distracted. I mean, even the most cinephile person that will go and watch a movie on their laptop or on their TV, they will look at their phone for a second. So I think that we need to watch movies only in theaters. Let's stop watching movies on TV.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, brilliant. Finally, what's for the future? What are you looking at? I mean, Fingernails is like almost a year that it's been out and about. So are you working on a new project?
Yes, we're working on a new project. It's called Background. And it's about, we follow 3 extras that they play in famous movies from 1984. And it's about how we're all trying to be protagonists in our lives, but we're still extras in this world.
Who's a director that if you had a Freaky Friday moment that you could transport yourself into their body for one weekend, you would like to sort of experience their...
I would love to be in the body of Leos Carax because I have never been in such a tiny body. And I would also love to be in Leos Carax's body because I want to do a Q&A and answer all the questions that Leos Carax never answered to people.
And probably give the wrong answers intentionally so that he'll have to spend the rest of his career...
No, I think that I will give the right answers that he's afraid of giving.
Ah, okay. So you think that's a little bit of a pose that he's putting off those answers?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's... I never understood, Leos Carax is my favorite filmmaker, but I never understood filmmakers that they are not giving answers. It's either insecurity, I think, or I don't know. they just don't know why they made their films.
Did you think Annette was the best movie ever?
Annette, I didn't like Annette.
But that's the best movie ever.
No, Lovers on the Bridge is the best movie ever. Le Amant du Pont Neuf, as is the French title.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
That's my favorite film of him, Sgok.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give you that. But Annette is way up there as well.
I didn't like Annette, I'm sorry.
Christos.
No, Annette, what do you want me to say? Okay, I will say something to, I don't know, how many people are hearing you?
Oh, well over 5.
More than 5?
More than 5, less than 100.
Oh, more than 5, less than 100. Okay, you can say to these 73 people that probably they will hear this that please return in cinemas and stop watching movies in fucking stupid streaming platforms.
There you go. You heard it here, and you watch as Cineworld run back to their to the cinemas and refinance on the strength of that. 2 or 3 busloads of people who are going to be arriving, demanding to see films. Thanks so much, Christos.
Thank you very much, John. Story about Jonathan Glazer.
Go ahead.
Can I say it?
Sure.
Okay, so
Why would you why
so
me?
the story is the following. Christian Petzold arrives
Oh, I know that story, so I'm gonna go pee. It's a great story.
arrives in 2012. I think it's 2012 in New York. I mean, at the beginning of 2010. I don't remember when. Somewhere there, and he arrives in New York for the film festival, New York Film Festival, and they are putting him in a very expensive hotel that is at the beginning of Central Park. I don't remember which one is the hotel. And he stays there, he goes for breakfast, and as he goes for breakfast, he's seeing that on the next table is Abbas Kiarostami.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And he says, "Hi, Abbas." They're saying hi to each other. They don't know each other very well, but they just nod to each other. And then they order, both of them, for breakfast. And he ordered, I don't know, scrambled eggs, a toast, an orange juice, a coffee. And after 20 minutes, a waiter comes to him and another waiter goes to Abbas Kiarostami and says $150. And they're both like, Christian goes to the waiter and says, "But what do you mean $150? We are invited from the festival." And says, "No, yeah, but the festival is not included, the breakfast is not included." And he's like, "Oh, fuck." And he hits the table. And then Abbas Kiarostami, he sees Abbas Kiarostami also feeling frustrated next to him. He also hits the table and he's like, "Oh, fuck, $150. And that's the end of the first day. Second day, Christian Petzold wakes up in the morning and says, "Okay, I cannot pay again $150 for, so I will go to the opposite side, across the street from the hotel. It's Central Park." So he went at the beginning of the Central Park, where is that kiosk that sells little donuts and coffee for $1 and donuts for $2. And he takes one donut, he takes one coffee, starts drinking the coffee, eating the donut, but he's hiding behind himself behind the kiosk because he's afraid that somebody from the festival will see him or another guest and they will see that what he's doing. I mean, he doesn't want to pay here and he goes and eats for... And as he turns his back, he sees Abbas Kiarostami being exactly behind him with the same coffee and the same donut. And he's also drinking and eating the donut because he also doesn't want to pay. And Christian was like, "Oh, fuck, Abbas is here again? What is going on?" And he's like, "Okay, Abbas, I'm not here for the coffee and the donut. I'm here because I wanted to see where Jonathan Glazer shot the opening scene of Birth." And Abbas says, oh yeah, I'm also for the same year. I'm also a big fan of Jonathan Glazer. And then I said, okay, goodbye. And they're living on different directions and they never met again.
Brilliant.
And I said that story to Jonathan Glazer in Telluride this year, and he told me that it's the best story he has ever heard about his movies, and that he was so excited because he didn't know that Christian Petzold and Abbas Kiarostami knows his movies. And I was like, of course. And he was like, wow, I love both of them. I love their work. And he was very
amazing.
excited about it.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff.